You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 194 of Arsenal Pass. Hayden here, as always, with Pankaj, Bhojwani. Pankaj, happy New Year, happy 2025. This is our first recording of 2025. How are you?
I'm alright. It's still New Year's Day for me over here, still 1st of January. So, recovering a little bit from celebrating New Year's Eve. And what about you? How's your first couple of days of New Year, of 2025 been?
Well, I'm further into the future than you, right, obviously. So I've experienced an extra day. It's the 2nd of January here. No, I mean, feels pretty good. Feels like a new year, I guess. Feels fairly similar to the old year. No, I mean, all things pretty well. This episode, we're going to be speaking about... Well, I mean, this is kind of the real down period for Flesh and Blood, isn't it? We were speaking about this a little bit last week. It feels like there's not massive amounts of downtime, considering we ran callings all the way through till mid-December, to the week before Christmas, in fact. But this is really the true downtime now until the Hunted releases. So we thought... Great opportunity to, first of all, got a couple of Command Cookout questions, a couple of juicy questions to go through, a bit of news, but also something that we had promised our listeners over a month ago, and we finally got the chance to run it. It is the interview that we did with yourself, Pankaj. Get to know your host. I'm excited that we finally found a slot to put this in, and I think our audience will be as well, because I think it's great. People know you, right? They know you, the face, the casting, Pankaj the caster. They might know a bit about Ethnic Smoke from your days of content creation, but how much do they really know about you? That's the question.
It's funny how many times we've tried to slot this interview into the various episodes so far, and we're like, oh, okay, we'll talk about this topic for a little bit, and we should have time for the interview after, but apparently we just yap too much, and all the previous episodes always end up being an hour long anyway, and so we couldn't fit the interview. But yeah, this downtime is a perfect to fit that in.
We've got that. We've got it this time. We're going to make it work. But before we get into all that, I guess this week in Flesh and Blood, probably not much from either of us. So what have you been spending your true downtime, your off-season doing this week?
Completely not Flesh and Blood related stuff. Catching up on some games, some video games which I haven't been able to play over the course of the year because I'm busy with Flesh and Blood stuff. Also celebrating New Year's, celebrating Christmas last week. Catching up with a little bit of reading as well. Honestly, just taking it very, very chilled and relaxed.
Yeah, what games have you been playing?
How's your New Year's? I'm Assassin's Creed Mirage. Because recently I was having a conversation with someone about Assassin's Creed, and they were talking about how, in their opinion, Odyssey is the best game of the franchise, which is a take. I mean, I think I enjoyed Odyssey way more than I thought I would, because I normally prefer like the classic stealth sort of gameplay. But I did enjoy Odyssey once I started looking at it as an RPG rather than a stealth game. So Mirage is the other one. I've also been replaying Dishonored.
I did that also.
That's a fun stealth game. Yeah. Both 1 and 2?
Just one. But it's so old now. It's pretty janky.
Yeah, and I'm starting to realize on the replay that Dishonored 2 is, in my opinion, so much better than Dishonored 1.
Yeah, which I didn't realize. I always thought it was the other way around.
Yeah, like the missions are just way more interesting. The powers are way more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you been up to this break?
Well, I've actually been working, so worked through this year. But I have, of course, there are still days off and there's downtime and it's quiet and not playing Flesh and Blood. So I've been playing a reasonable amount of The Bazaar still. I'm really enjoying that game. I think it's going to be my new kind of Hearthstone, or my new kind of like side game that I play when I want to get a bit of a fix. Through the year, I've done different things. I played a bit of Arena to do some drafting for a while. But I think when I'm not playing Fab, it's a nice game to have. And I think I think there's a long way for this game still to go. They're still in beta, but I do find it quite enjoyable. They've had no patches in the past 2 weeks, though, which has maybe slowed it down a little bit. But
yeah, I mean, Christmas, New Year's time could be totally expected of taking a break from working in the game. And I've just been hearing about how big the shifts have been every time they put out a new patch.
Yes,
that I'm kind of off joining, like starting to play the game while it's still in early access. At first, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna join early access just like everyone else. And I heard like how much more, like as you're saying, it still has a long way to go. I was like, you know what? I think I'll just wait for the full release before I start engaging with it.
It actually kind of feels a little bit like when you see big shifts in the Flesh and Blood meta, like a new set releases or, a big impactful banning. Like, that's actually kind of what it feels like every time they release these patches. So I'm kind of okay with it, but if it happens, I think the stability will come with the game, but it's only 3 heroes at the moment, so I think that has a big impact on it and limits it a little bit. But yeah, other than that, I've been spending time with friends, bit of running and movies. Went and saw Nosferatu yesterday, which was great. It came out in Australia on New Year's Day, not Christmas Day like it did in the US. So yeah, like a bit of gothic horror, always nice to see. So.
Is it a pure horror film? Is it like a horror or is it like a thriller? It's actually like jump scares and scary stuff. Or?
I mean, it's not like a jump scare horror, but it is like a gothic horror film, is how I would describe it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty good. If you like that.
If I don't like horror, would I like this movie?
Potentially.
Like I don't like The Ring, for example.
No, it's not a true horror. It's not like a jump scare true horror. Yeah. I think potentially. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to move on to the news. Just a reminder to everyone that our preview card is going to drop on January 16th US time and January 17th Australia time. And it's quite a good spicy one. Not quite the same as some of the suggestions we got on our previous video when people tried to guess what it is. No draconic chef hero or anything like that. But it's a cool spoiler. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Aside from that, we did mention downtime, but there's still Battle Hardens happening. So this weekend there'll be Battle Hardens Hong Kong and Atlanta, and next weekend is Toronto. I'm not sure which one of these are being streamed. Hopefully at least one of them, so at least we'll be able to tune in and catch the last of this meta that we're in before Hunter releases and shakes everything up.
Pretty sure Toronto is, because I think Invasion is doing it, and I'm pretty sure they are doing some amount of streaming for it. I think there will be a stream, I believe.
Awesome. And on top of that, we do have some giveaway winners, which we announced on last week's pod. So please remember to reach out to us so we can send you the scarf or scarves and a playmat if you got that one. Email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. Just a reminder, the winners were SemNem1Gnome and PVE Gamer 3905. So go ahead and email us your details and we'll get those out to you.
Yeah, nice generic. Did you use a generic name generator for those two? All right, Commander Cookout time. We've got a couple of questions, but a reminder, if you do want to get your questions in for the Commander Cookout, please do so. Actually, here is the call out. Me and Pankaj have decided we are doing a mailbag episode next week. So when this drops, drop your mailbag questions in the YouTube comments below. We're taking many questions on many different topics. We will try and answer as many as we can, of course. But we do like interesting, fun, juicy, level up questions. So if you've got something, drop it in the YouTube comments below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're on Spotify or Apple, then drop over to YouTube and drop your question below for next week's mailbag pod. With that said, a couple of questions to get stuck into. Pankaj, you can also actually arsenalpassfab@gmail.com as well if you want to get those questions in, or if you're in our Discord, you can also do that. So first question for this week's Commander Cookout comes from Fancy, a regular on the Arsenal Pass Discord, dropping in questions. With the Hunted a month away, what is the new 1-cost 3-power attack reaction with a hoop to jump through that you think will save Warrior, and why is it being given to Assassin? Alternatively...
Well, Assassin...
well, there's two parts. Yeah, two parts to this question, but we can answer them one at a time. Alternatively, is 10-foot tall and bulletproof actually a good card? What is the best 10-foot tall and bulletproof deck? We can start with the 1-cost 3-power attack reaction, Pankaj.
Well, Assassin's getting a 0-cost 3-power attack reaction in Tarantula Toxin, so yeah, this is getting a better version. But to answer the first part of it, what would be the new 1-cost 3-power reaction to save Warrior? I mean, I hope it's not a 1-cost plus 3-power reaction, because I don't think that'll save Warrior. I think it needs to be something more along the lines of Blade Flurry and Unsheathed, which were fantastic upgrades, and, Blade Flurry is 0-for-4 attack reaction, and Unsheathed is 0-for-3 with probably Go again. So I think it needs to be along those lines.
So I think just why is it being given to an Assassin if this is to happen? Well, I kind of think non-Mystic Assassin needs it. Like, I think, not to say Azuri is bad or anything. I think Azuri is clearly good. It's a Pro Tour winning hero. But I think depending on how the game unfolds and the meta unfolds, I do think a couple of these reactions for Assassin to play in that way are going to be needed. We spoke about redundancy a couple of weeks ago on the pod and how that generates power, and I do think Assassin needs some of that redundancy in some of those cards to push that kind of archetype. Not to say there isn't strong reactions, because there is, but I think it's about some of the redundancy there. So if there was a 1-cost 3 power that did something relevant, I could see that being Assassin. I think my hot take on Warrior is that I'm not sure it needs it. Like, I actually think that once Enigma and to an extent New being the last, I think, of the 3 Mystic Heroes that are going to rotate through Living Legend, I think that, but particularly once Enigma is out of the meta, I think that's really good for Warrior, and I think it's had some of these tools given to it quite recently, so I don't know if it needs it.
I think you brought up New as something that might need to rotate out. I feel like Warrior, at least the dual-handing Warriors, do have a fairly good matchup into New, at least the way News are currently built.
Yeah.
Of course, if Warrior becomes meta and the News start taking frailty traps or whatever, maybe it could change. But the way it currently feels, like when I'm on New, the last thing I want to face is like a Hatchet Dory. Not the last thing, but one of the last few things I want to face is like a Hatchet Dory. Like that matchup is horrendous.
What about Dawnblade, though?
Oh, Dawnblade's fine.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking. That single weapon is potentially more interesting to me, as in terms of like power ceiling. Honestly, I have a real challenge with the dual weapon warriors, in that I think they are consistent, and we actually spoke about this a few weeks ago on the pod of why they had success and then quickly dipped away. Their ceiling is quite low a lot of the time, like their true output of damage, whereas single weapon, for instance, Dawnblade Dory can really get out of control. But I do think, for example, that really does need New to fall away. But the question then is, what do the other assassins do to it? So on. But anyway, I think once Enigma goes, I think that's a really big increase for Warrior, and I think it already has a lot of the tools it's going to need to compete. 1 or 2 more won't hurt, and it's going to get those anyway. A 1-cost 3 power attack react, I don't know about that though. I don't. To your point, I don't know if that's the card that it wants.
Yeah, I don't think it would end up being played. Like, they already have some 1-cost 3 attack reactions that just don't play, right?
Well, yeah, your extra resource is so taxed whether you're playing single-handed or dual weapon warriors now. Like, what that hero really needs is 0-cost or 3-cost cards, honestly, or 2-cost cards even. It's not 1-cost cards. Like that slot or that resource curve spot is really taxed, I think, because of, you spoke about one of your favorite cards last week, Grains of Bloodspill, for instance. I mean, that is a card that is doing a lot of work, but not if your resources is being competed against or competed with in that slot. So, yeah.
And on that note, it needs better blues. I mean, Provoke is, I think, is going to be an amazing upgrade. Just purely because it's a blue that's playable. So I think getting more of those as well would be awesome.
10-foot tall and bulletproof. What's your thoughts?
So, best 10-foot tall and bulletproof deck, I mean, Lavaya comes to mind because of the cheesy thing where you can block with it or attack with it, and then you flip. So then you dodge the drawback because the minus intellect was tied to Lavaya, but now you're a different hero. And then that got me thinking, does that mean New Arachne would work the same way with this card? Because, and New Arachne changes hero way more often than Lavaya does, and it's not the specific threshold. Like, it seems like as long as marking is a little bit more deterministic, you can actually just plan exactly, like you're able to block with this card and mark them, and then you flip, and then you don't get the minus intellect. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to work that way with New Arachne, but if it does, I could see just that being the best 10-foot tall bulletproof deck.
Yeah, that's interesting. So on that, if a hero is marked, does that mean if Arachne gets marked and it flips that it's no longer marked?
Oh, so Arachne. Oh, you're saying like in like a mirror or something,
like a mirror.
Or against one of the. Oh, yeah, that's a.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's a classic wait for release notes moment, I suppose.
Yeah. If anyone has any insight on that, maybe they've already thought of this question, they've already pondered it. Let us know, comments below. But yeah, I'm interested in that. It's a good shout. I mean, with Lavaya, it's I guess maybe a little bit cheesy, but maybe with Arachne. Do you think? I mean, I guess the first part of the question is 10-foot tall and bulletproof actually a good card?
Oh, I don't think so. Like not in a vacuum, right? I mean, like it's hard to, as with any card that you talk about in the card game, it's hard to like look at things in just a vacuum. So like with the shell that it goes and everything around it as well, right? Like how it works and everything else. So in a vacuum, I'm kind of like, no, I don't see this being a good card. But if you tell me New Arachne can basically dodge the drawback by just flipping, then I'm like, okay, then it's actually insane, and it's actually a really, really good card.
That's a crazy take, Pankaj. Crazy take. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I also think it's bad. I also don't think it's a good card. But I did get me thinking, what is the best 10-foot tall and bulletproof deck? You landed at Levi, I landed at Victor, Rouse interaction, obviously. But I think you can just kind of like block with your card, drop it, and then hopefully the downside is not that impactful because you can still swing your weapon next turn because you're a guardian. I don't know. It seems like it might be the best fit for it right now as it stands, but like you say, other interactions that can work favorably with dodging the effect is going to be the best possible home for it. So, yeah.
I remember the first time I saw this card, the other thing that I was thinking about was the card that doubles power, that brute card.
Oh, yes.
I forget the name.
Yep.
I've got a name, but the one where
limb from limb.
Tear limb from limb.
Yeah,
tear limb from limb. Yeah, that one. I was thinking of that as a potential synergy piece with this, where sure you'll still get the drawback, but at least you are doubling the the payoff part of it. I guess you just have a very overrate attack.
Yeah, is tear limb from limb
any?
It's not tied to brute cards, right?
I don't think so, unless. Yeah, maybe double check that.
I'm gonna fact check us on that one. I think you're right. I think it's not tied to that. But no, good point. Yeah. I mean, the card doesn't seem good right now, but it has such a high ceiling that it could be right. It's the next brute action. Sorry, so it doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, well, yeah. So maybe that's why I never explored that at all. Aside from the fact that I don't play brute. Yeah, I mean, in that case, honestly, my only thing is the whole dodging the effect part of it. But yeah.
I think it's a good shout. We shall see. Mm-hmm. We also
technically Teklo Vossen could do it too then.
Oh, yeah.
Transforms too. It still just feels like it's all too time dependent, right? The problem with this card is that, yeah, it's like in Levi, you're like, unless you draw it the turn you're flipping, it's so bad.
Yeah.
Same for Teklo. If you draw it before you've got your 4-max and Singularity, you can also just not really doing anything. Whereas Neo Arachne, though, that sounds like you could flip consistently enough that this works.
Yeah, consistency is the key word, right? We spoke about this on our pod a couple weeks ago. Like, consistency is what makes powerful cards good. Makes them reliable and makes them a top tier meta contender. It is power with consistency. It is not one or the other. So, yeah, agree. All right, great question. Thank you for the question, Fancy. We have another question for the Commander Cookout this week, which comes emailed directly in from us from Bill. And Bill says, love the show. Also, Pankaj has been a great addition to the show. So shout out there to our friend Pankaj. So here's my question.
Thank you.
We went through the banning of the books where one of the tenets of the game is to make it so you can't draw extra cards so easily. Isn't it equally, if not more destructive to the game when an opponent can look into your hand and then remove a card, like Bonds of Agony, Persuasive Prognosis, Lost in Thought, or Phantasmaclasm? Cards like Pummel, CNC, Leave No Witness, Crippling Crush, Tear Asunder, Oak and Old don't give your opponent the choice of card and looking at your hand. So some of those are random and some of those are selection, right? These choices of subtraction cards are far more powerful than randomly adding a card to your hand. That's a statement I think we're going to discuss. What are your thoughts? Thanks for all the great discussion and insight.
Well, first, thank you for the kind words on the new addition to the show. I think the key difference here is that the cards listed, the cards that subtract cards from your opponent's hand, most of them offer points of interaction. For example, you block the on-hit effect of the CNC. You can do that with armor or other stuff. Whereas the Art of War and the tomes from back in the day was something the other side could never do anything about. They kind of just have to sit there and watch you draw your cards and then do things with them. So I think that is a big difference. Exception, of course, being Siren's Call and like Phantasmaclasm. And yeah, on that front, I do agree that it is way too strong. And we've definitely harped on those before. Yeah,
I think it's a good shout. Like they effectively printed a card called Balance of Justice to balance the effects like Art of War and Tome, right? To try and create some interaction with those effects, right? So I think you can look at it that way in terms of that interactive side. And then I agree. I think there's two streams to this. There is the non-interactable hand disruption, and then there is the interactable hand disruption, and then within those, there's the subgenres of selection and non-selection, so random and non-selection. So I think if we look at those, first of all, the interactable ones, like you spoke about, the ones that you can effectively block, right? So the Pummels, the CNCs, Leaving Witnesses, Crippling Crush, Tear Sunders, etc. Some of those have evasion effects in the form of Pummel being a reaction, of Tear Asunder giving the Tear Asunder dominate. So there is a bit of kind of semi-interactable nature with those, but those are then not selection elements with those. They are either owner chooses or random. On the other hand, when you go back to the flip side, you've got Lost in Thought is selection, right? But it returns
selection, and it gives them a ponder, and it doesn't draw it back. A Phantasmaclasm is one where you draw it back immediately. Lost in Thought gives you the ponder.
So I guess the two that stand out the most are Phantasmaclasm, to your point, and Siren's Call, right? They're the most egregious. I guess, do they, in your mind, stack up with the likes of Art of War and stuff like that then? I
think Siren's Call does. Phantasmaclasm, it does feel like I might be in a bit more of a minority, which how much I hate this card. It's because it does refund you the card, right? And to the question here at hand, it doesn't technically actually remove any card from the opponent because they still have 4 cards after you resolve the Phantasmaclasm. But it does have the selection piece of it. And I think particularly my problem is that the selection piece is also tied to being a ridiculously overrated attack. That's part of my problem with it, which is kind of moving away from what the question's asking. So maybe you should leave Phantasmaclasm out of the conversation. But Siren's Call, I do think it is against the correct deck on the level of Art of War or even higher. Of course, this is contingent on the opponent having blues, like against a Guardian or something, against one of the Mystic heroes like Zen. It's incredible, and I would put it on Art of War level or power level, but obviously not if you're against an Aurora or an Azalea.
Why is Lost in Thought so underplayed, or I guess not played, or why is it not at that same tier?
I feel like Mara Faris will have some disagreement on that one. She was very, very. I think she was high on this card, if I remember correctly.
I think there's a few people high on this card, but it's not had the success. It's not been as people haven't. This is always the level of success. People haven't whinged about it like they have about Siren's Call, right?
Yeah. I believe Lost in Thought has some stipulations on it.
So
right? I can
read the card.
Attack, I think
it's a 1-cost illusionist action, defense for 2, has go again, and says look at target hero's hand and choose an attack action card. If you do, they put the card in the bottom of the deck and they create a ponder token. So is it just purely that attack actions are just more narrow than blues? Like a blue is always relevant for most matchups. It has an effect, or is it the fact that the anti-symmetrical, so you draw the card, is just so powerful?
I think a big part of it is that it just doesn't fit. Like which of the illusionist game plans fits with what this card is doing? Also taking into account that blocks for 2, and for example, you look at Enigma or even Prism to some extent, they kind of have a board they want to protect with blocking.
Yeah,
and having these 2 blocks doesn't help. And if the payoff is high enough, sure, I could see it being a place, but you also have to keep into account, like, it's not a blue for Enigma, so she doesn't want to do any of that kind of stuff. So it's like, it taxes that part of it while being a block too. And on the Prism side, it's not yellow either, so it doesn't help her with the stuff she's trying to do. It doesn't have the flexibility of some of the other cards. And it doesn't fit the cost curve either, because a lot of her heralds cost 2, and you want to be pitching a yellow. So unless you're exactly doing like War Tune Herald after, it just doesn't fit everything else, the rest of the shell, very well. It kind of fit the best in Dromite because it's a red, so I could see why that was. But then also she was pitching a reds too, so you're kind of
exactly
using 2
even
cards
in Dromite was kind of I think what it comes down to is it's all those things, but you pair with Siren's Call is the opposite. It actively progresses your game plan. It has an effect that can replace itself. It's probably a little bit less narrow than an attack action card, for instance. I think there's just every single dial on that card comparative to Lost in Thought is like cranked up a little bit.
And Siren's Call refunds you the card, whereas Lost in Thought refunds them the card, like in the form of a ponder.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think maybe we can. So we agree. Siren's Call is the kind of epitome of this hand disruption that is non-interactable, is very strong, and potentially not a good fit for the game. But Phantasmaclasm, you did say you maybe a little bit biased, you hate this card. But for me, Phantasmaclasm, I think, is very, very powerful. And yes, they get our card back, but Selective Disruption is a really powerful effect. And I think if this card wasn't a 9-power attack on the back of it, I think that card would just be, if it was, for instance, like a 4-power attack, for instance, I still think that's just kind of like, and it cost relevant. I think it's just like a better Lost in Thought, honestly. But the fact that it's like, it's a 2-card 9, like that is, the damage economy of the card is just so high. I actually think that is the big problem with that card. It's another outlier, I think, a little bit, but it's a big one.
Especially when you consider it's going in a deck where that deck is asking the opponent to reach a certain damage threshold turn after turn, otherwise they just fall behind. And you get to just, pick one of the cards and like move it away and deal them 9 damage to the face as well.
Yeah.
So just that. And again, which is why I was like, I'm not entirely sure whether Phantasmaclasm fits in this question, because part of the problem is just everything else that the deck is asking for. Like, you put like a Phantasmaclasm in something like New, maybe. It's less egregious, given like the stuff that she's trying to do. Whereas when it's in a deck that is having a board state and the opponent needs to deal with that by meeting a damage check, it's a little tougher. What are your thoughts on the overarching part of this question, which is the on-hit, take a card from you stuff versus card draw that used to exist in the game? Because I think that is part of this question.
Thank you for bringing it back. I was about to bring that back, but you've beat me to it. I think, so Bill's proposition is it equally, if not more destructive to the game? I think interaction is always more favorable than non-interaction. Like, I want interaction in my games as opposed to non-interaction. And this is at least one-sided interaction. Do you know, like, so when you look at like the damage buffs and Art of Wars and things like that, it's non-interactive and it provides, I guess, damage that is also, so the card itself and the action taking the effect is non-interactive, and then the damage itself is, to an extent, non-interactive. Yes, you can block it, but what it's adding to your board is you don't get a say about it. Now, there is a few cards that can kind of combat that, of course, but for the most part. Whereas I think when it comes to the card selection of hand disruption, for instance, I think your opponent is, so as the person playing that card, you're expending a card to do so, and then you are using that card to effectively take something from the opponent to disrupt them. So I think it's a little bit more fair, so to speak. It's something I prefer to see as opposed to the other side. But I think Siren's Call is the like obvious one that does not fit into that, because it immediately cashes back the card you had to spend to do so. So it's not a like-for-like trade.
And it doesn't offer the point of interaction, right? The stuff like the Leave No Witnesses and the Command and Conquer, the Crippling Crushes.
Yes.
Your opponent is interacting. Like, the opponent can block and stop you from, getting those on-hits off. Whereas Siren's Call, it doesn't quite have that. So, yeah, which is why I put Siren's Call on the level of, like, Art of War and the other stuff, and, like, the tomes back in the day. But I would not put the Leave No Witnesses and the Command and Conquers and the Persuasive Prognoses in the same power level as Art of War and Tomes of Aether Wind, and etc.
Definitely not. But honestly, actually, I wouldn't even put Siren's Call, or I wouldn't put non-interactive hand disruption, so Lost in Thought, for instance, or Siren's Call in the premise of Siren's Call. The reason I think, for me, Siren's Call is just so front and above is because of the immediate cashback. Even Phantasmaclasm is like, because of the 9-power body, it almost touches on that. But the fact it costs you 2 cards, it has Phantasm, they cash the card back immediately. To me, it's like slightly under that. But honestly, I actually think for me, Phantasmaclasm and Siren's Call are the 2 cards that stand a bit above. The rest I have absolutely zero problem with. And even if Siren's Call didn't cash you the card back or gave you even like a Ponder token, like, I'd be way more on board with that. Like, I do want some hand disruption effects. I am okay with having those in the game. I just want them to be a little bit more balanced. But I think they were disappointed with Lost in Thought's impact on the game, honestly.
I would like the targeted... Yeah, I'm with you. I do like the hand disruption part, and some of the stuff where you look at your opponent's hand too. I think done tastefully and done in rare occasions is, I think, quite good. Like, I think the way New does, aside from Siren's Call, like the Persuasive Prognosis and the Bonds of Agony, because of the sort of the hoops you have to jump through to land those effects, particularly Bonds of Agony. Persuasive, not so much, but it is a 1 power that doesn't get buffed by its own effect. So, you kind of do need to jump through hoops effectively to get the on-hit off, because they'll normally just put like a piece of armor in front of it if you don't have the buff. It's just, you don't get it. So, in those cases, and especially given the mystic assassin identity, like the succubus type thing, looking to your opponent's hand has that flavorful aspect of it where you're reading their mind kind of thing and you're like understanding them. And you had hoops to jump through to go ahead and do that. So I find those, as you said, like I think those are good for the game. And in those cases, I feel like it is the powerful effect, which is incredibly powerful, is warranted based on the hoops that you go through. Persuasive also has the RNG associated with it as well, right? That the color of the top of the deck needs to matter.
Yeah. It's funny, like just from a personal standpoint, the card that I dislike playing against the most is Persuasive Prognosis, though, because it has the most varied like outcome, and I like knowable outcomes. I think I personally, I mean, they're easier, right? Knowable outcomes, you can understand what's the impact to your hand, the impact to your opponent's next play, and I think Persuasive Prognosis is the hardest one to understand. I mean, like Pummel, honestly, the Pummel's so easy to see. I think it's one of the most telegraphed plays. Like, it's so hard to not telegraph a Pummel, honestly. Unless it's a bad Pummel, in which case you probably don't care. But it's like, for me, it's like Persuasive Prognosis is like, honestly, it's Siren's Call, Phantasmaclasm, but then it's like Persuasive Prognosis, I think. And then probably an Oakenold, to be honest. Oakenold can
Yeah, Persuasive, it's interesting you say Persuasive is, you don't like playing against that more than like Bonds of Agony. And I think, it just comes off the fact that Persuasive has the on-hit inbuilt. It doesn't need to do the free reaction hoop. So it just has the on-hit built, so you kind of need to deal with it. But I think part of that is we're sort of going back to everything else around it, right? Because Nu's attack correction sweet, she's got a +3 with a hiss, she's got +4 venomous bite, +5 with Justinic, or she's gonna mask you, or she'll Siren's Call you. So like, the range is just it's way too wide, and it goes back to the knowable outcomes thing that you were talking about. But in terms of egregiousness, I suppose, is Persuasive Prognosis to you out? Okay.
No. I just,
we're both in line with that,
which is why I wanted to say it. I think that card is perfectly fine. I think that card is great for what it does. It's just, for me personally, it's one of the most frustrating cards to play against of that list. But it's a different gripe, I guess. Like I want that card to be in the game. To be clear, I just
if it makes you feel any better, I feel like I'm obviously making up the number here, but like 50% of the time, the color on top of the deck was like a color they didn't have in their hand anyway. So
yeah.
My Persuasive was like whiff all the time. It's actually kind of funny.
So unlucky. Well, great question. Very interesting question. I love these kind of philosophical questions, especially when it's so relevant to what we're seeing in the game right now. And I think even, what this makes me stand back and think about sometimes, and this is something I have thought about recently when it comes to Enigma, Phantasmaclasm. Why are you not immediately just putting 3 Phantasmaclasms in your deck when you have access to that card? So it's like, why do you play Nu? Well, one of the best cards is Siren's Call. If Siren's Call isn't good in the meta right now, I'm really a lot less likely to want to play Nu, for instance, right? Like, it just comes down to those things for me. So great question. Speaking of questions, just to reiterate, if you want to get your questions in for our mailbag episode next week, please make sure to do so. Email, Discord, YouTube comments below. With all of that, Pankaj, if there's nothing else to add, we're going to go to the main topic and hear more from you, actually.
It was recorded a few months ago at this point. I don't even remember what I said. I hope it all still applies. Probably does.
Let's find out. And on to the main topic of the podcast this week, while we're in Osaka, of course. We're not quite in Osaka for the main topic, Pankaj, but we did want to get to know, well, I particularly, and I know our audience wants to get to know a little bit more about yourself as the new host of Arsenal Pass. At this point, you're nearly a month in podcast years with, terminology, time. It's very odd recording this way. We're recording ahead of time, but we're doing podcasts kind of semi out of sequence as well. But anyway, anything you want to, I guess, say before I ask you some of the questions on the Get to Know Your Host segment?
One, I'm incredibly nervous. Just you're about to like grill me on stuff about myself that I don't even know if I know. Other than that, I mean, just what I also echoed about a month ago when I did join the podcast. I mean, thanks to you and thanks to everyone for being so receptive. This was, as I mentioned, big shoes to fill, and hoping I'm filling those shoes. And I'm going to continue trying my best at filling those shoes.
I think everyone's been thinking you're doing a pretty good job so far. So we got some questions about yourself, your TCG background, and also some fab questions kind of interdispersed. And the first question, I think, is a big one. I think, you always want to hear from your friends, or, I think is one that I've been asked multiple times, and that's what got you into TCGs?
That was so long ago that I'm not even sure like what the correct answer is to that. So I think I'm just gonna start with like the franchise, right? So Pokemon was something that I really loved growing up. It was a big part of my childhood. I used to watch the shows, watch a bunch of the movies and stuff. So it was very, very enfranchised with the Pokemon franchise. And then, the card game came out and I just was in some store and I saw Pokemon cards and I was like, hey, this is more ways for me to engage with Pokemon. So that's how I got into the Pokemon TCG. Well, I say got into my TCG experience in my early years was all only kitchen table, just playing at home with my brother and stuff. So this Pokemon TCG kind of didn't delve too much further into that because as I grew older, my brother was very much into Magic the Gathering. So I used to play kitchen table Magic the Gathering with him. And then my school friends were into Yu-Gi-Oh! So I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! With them as well. So Pokemon was something I didn't really have anyone to play with. So I just had like my little collection. I have the OG like Charizard, Venusaur, and Blastoise. I don't know which edition. I don't know which like edition or whatever. I don't think it's like the first edition, but it's the the early ones, and I hold on to them like very, very dearly. Yeah, so that was like the beginnings, like just kitchen tables of like these three TCGs, mostly Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, and a bit of Pokemon. And then what got me into like competitive, like what sparked a flame to like be like competitive and like engage really, really deeper actually happened many, many years later. And that was with Artifact. I don't know how many people actually know Artifact, but so I used to be a Dota player, right? And it's a similar theme to like I used to love the Pokemon franchise and I bought the cards. I used to be like so much into Dota. Like I have a kind of embarrassing number of hours on Steam on Dota 2. Like it's like 3.5k or something.
I was gonna say how many thousand hours, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 3,500. Not even counting like Dota 1 hours, right? Which I used to have. Anyway, so then they announced Artifact, and I was like, heck yeah, card games is something I did enjoy engaging with growing up, like the Magic and the Yu-Gi-Oh! I was like, heck yeah, I want to play this. And then it's not Artifact 1 that got me hooked. It was Artifact 2, which I don't think many people even know about or even
I didn't know there was a I didn't know there was a
Yeah, so Artifact 1 flopped, right? It had a terrible monetization model and it just like died. So what they did about I think a year later, they reached out to everyone who had bought Artifact 1 and said they're working on Artifact 2 with fixing a lot of the problems that people had at Artifact 1, mainly the monetization, mainly the random RNG and all stuff like that. And they were like, if you're interested, you can sign up for the beta over here. And I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to sign up for the beta. And they were rolling out the beta invites in waves, and I finally got in, and I loved it. I was hooked. And kind of getting so deep into that is kind of what pulled me out of Dota in some sense, actually, because I was like this thing that was like sinking my teeth. And that was what really sparked I want to play competitively in a game. So I went really deep in that, and a few months later they announced that they killed the beta. It never even left the beta stage, and they're just like, yeah, we're discontinuing work on this.
But you were back. Tragic. You were back into TCGs, yeah.
Yeah, but that's when I was like, oh, there's this hole, and I need to like fill it with like competitive TCG. Like, what am I looking for? And I was like, for months I was in this like trying Runeterra, trying Magic again, and it just nothing was sticking until I found Flesh and Blood.
So then you found Flesh and Blood. If I remember you saying from last week, around the time of Tales of Aria, is that right?
Yeah.
And what brought you into, I guess, Fab? Like, what was the thing about it? Was it the hero-based model similar to what you liked about Dota? Like, what is it that got you into Fab?
Right. So, the overlying concept behind it was the reduced variance. And I think what cemented that this is a game that had like less variance than something like Magic, for example, was I was watching. I honestly, I forget which event was happening this time, but I was like tuning into like nationals. The nationals. Oh, whatever. It was around a time period where there were like a couple of tournaments going on, and I noticed like the same names show up in both top 8s of the tournaments, and that's when I was like, okay, wait, this is a game that has where you can actually express your skill a lot more than typical, to the point where you reduce your variance like significantly. And that's what was really that's what drew me to this one in particular over the other options, which I was like looking for. And that definitely was a case for Artifact 2 as well. Artifact 2 definitely had that where the better player kind of won like 90% of the time. And especially like the Tales of Aria, Flesh and Blood days, it definitely also felt that way as well. I think now we've moved maybe a little bit more towards variant side, but still very well within the reason, still very well within something I'm comfortable with. But yeah, whereas like the other games, I was looking at like Magic, for example, I was like, it felt like it was too far in the variance aspect of it.
Yeah, the RNG side. I mean, winning is addictive, right? Once you do it consistently at a 90% rate, for instance, it's pretty hard to pull yourself away, especially if you enjoy the product or the IP or whatever it might be that you're tying your kind of the enjoyment factor, the kind of livability of it through. And I think, it's really interesting. I've had a very similar kind of like journey with like IP and what got me into card games, and then transitioned to Magic, and then eventually to Flesh and Blood. It's fascinating. What was the first few events that you played in Flesh and Blood? Like, what was kind of, you said I remember you saying you watched for a little bit. I know you listened to Arsenal Pass in the early days. What kind of was the turning point for actually getting in and playing? And then I'm going to follow that up with what you did next. But yeah, tell us about, I guess, getting in and actually playing some events.
Right, so the first event, like the first event I had to make a FabTCG account for was Tales of Aria pre-release. So a few weeks before then, one of my Commander friends actually, because like I said, I was looking for card games to play. Magic wasn't something I was going to be competitive in, but I still just want to play cards. So I was playing Commander, made some friends in Commander. And one of my friends randomly messaged our Discord group saying, hey, I bought these like Flesh and Blood Blitz decks. People wanted to just try it. And that same day, it was actually really weird. It was like a combination of a few things that happened. That same day, I also got a video recommendation, the Toleran Community College, the video on how to play Flesh and Blood. So I had just finished watching that. Literally 2 minutes later, like this message in the Discord being like, "Hey, do you want to try these Blitz decks?" And I was like, yeah, you know what? Right,
turns out I do.
Yeah, and then a few weeks later was the Tales of Aria pre-release. So that was the first event.
Yeah. And the first hero that you played in Classic Constructed.
In Classic Constructed, I believe it was Viserai.
Good
yeah, so so what happened? This is a pre-release. Then I think shortly after was a tournament that I watched, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. I'm gonna dive deep into this. And I started with Blitz, obviously. So that that's like a month later or something. I had obviously my first Blitz deck was Kano, like obviously because I love Wizard. Like Wizard, any sort of RPG sort of game, I'm always playing a spellcaster. That's just sort of flavor that I like. But then everyone was like, oh no, Kano sucks in CC, you can't make this a CC deck. And I was like, fine. I was looking around, Viscera was really good, Skeletor was still legal and everything. So Viscera was my first like serious CC deck.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it. That speaks to me.
Very similar to you, right? I mean, you're also a Kano and Viscera player.
Exactly. And then I guess the interesting thing for me, and I guess one of the ways that I first heard about you was through content creation. So I guess I'm curious, because I don't know the story, and I'm sure a lot of our audience don't as well. Like, what got you into creating content for Fab TCG? I guess motivation, or just how it kind of came about, really.
So similar to the bug that got me into competitive TCG in the first place, it actually started with Artifact 2. So Artifact 2, I was like super deep into it, like I said, and I do this thing, like when I'm really deep into something, I will consume like all the content that I can for it. Like, when I was like, I'm getting to Fab and listening to Arsenal Pass, until now I still, I listen to Runaways every week, I listen to Mana Podcast every week, On the Bobble, and it's like a few others as well. I'm not gonna list everything because I don't want people to feel left out, but yeah, I listen to these. So back then, Artifact 2 just being in closed beta and like not too much content, there was one streamer. There was like basically one streamer who would stream consistently, and I'm always tuned in for his stream. And I remember thinking, man, I wish there were other streams that I could watch and like, more content for me to consume over this game that I really, really freaking love. And then someone just asked me, because I was complaining about this, and then they were like, wait, why don't you stream? And I was like, how did I like, it never crossed my mind. It's just, to me, streaming and content creation always felt like, other people do that. And it's just, there's a simple question, wait, why don't you be the one streaming? I was like, wait, oh yeah, I can do that. Like, all you need is like a webcam and a mic, and it's like, okay, you can stream. So it started with that, and then similar, that gave me the bug to create content. Just talk about this. Like, I mean, anyone who's heard me cast, anyone who's heard this podcast for the last few weeks knows I can yap about this game forever. So I was kind of just like that. That's kind of what gave me the bug for it.
That's awesome. And I guess, from there, you created content. I mean, I vividly remember, because I watched a lot of it, your Talishar replays and sort of like, going over strategies, and it was very strategic based content that you produced. And then, eventually, you transitioned into being a caster for Fab TCG, which you are now. I mean, tell us how people will be interested as well. How does that kind of opportunity come about? But also, what made you want to get into the casting side of Fab?
So the opportunity part of it, I mean, that one is basically one guy behind how that started, and that's Ethan Vincent, right? So I guess how it started in the super early days was people. I don't know how many people know this, but he had a Clash tournament, like Clash being his own format that he came up with as like a starter format, but like more approachable than Blitz, because Blitz you still need a whole bunch of like legendary equipment and all these expensive cards. But he was like, let's have a starter format that's not quite commoner. You still get a flavor of a hero, so your specializations are allowed, but it's still not full max power like Blitz is. So he had a Clash tournament, and he invited some content creators to be part of the tournament, just to increase its visibility. So I was one of the content creators he invited, and then he was also looking for people to cast the games. And I was like, hey, I can cast some of the games I'm not playing. I'll be totally down to do that. And he was like, sure. Cast a couple of those Clash games. And then next thing I know, he's asking me whether I want to fly out for Battle Hard in New Jersey, I believe. He's like, do you want to fly to Battle? Because he was doing those backpack streams back in the day, right?
Yeah.
He was just like, he was bringing his whole setup in his one backpack, and just traveling and just streaming the game just for his love of the game. And he's like he asked me, do you want to fly out and be one of the casters for this? And similarly, I was like, heck yeah, I love this game too. I can yap about it forever. I was like, yeah, I want to fly out there, and I'll cast it. And this was on our own expenses, basically, for both of us. So that was the early beginning. It was just Ethan randomly reaching out, and then from there it was just like one thing led to another. After that, it was calling Indianapolis. No, I forgot which calling. But it was a calling. That was the first one. Me and Sam got together, and we met each other for the first time, and just casting together the entire calling. And then next thing we know, after that, we both got an email saying, "Do you want to come cast nationals?" And then that's how it was. That's how it began.
It's crazy, yeah. And I mean, I think people will say, or ask, kind of the kind of trajectory, and you just spoke to it. And I think, for me, it's you've been. I mean, one of the big reasons I wanted you on the pod, Pankaj, is you are one of my favorite casters in terms of particularly you and Sam and what you bring to the stream and to what it all stands for. So it's awesome to see you, and I think people are gonna, if they haven't heard you yet, hearing you at Worlds, I think they're gonna be Worlds is, I guess, happened at this point. So if you haven't already checked it out, go back and have a listen. I'm sure it would have been great. So yeah, I want to go.
That means a lot. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Well deserved. I want to go quick fire on a few questions about yourself. Help people learn a little bit more about you, not just from the TCG side, but from you, Pankaj, the person. Where did you grow up, and where did you go to school?
I was born and raised in Singapore, and just went to school in Singapore all the way up until 18. So I did all the way up until high school in Singapore. Had 2 years of army after that. For those of you who don't know, if you're a Singaporean and you are a boy, you have to do 2 years of mandatory military service. So I had to do that. And then after I did my university in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and then now I'm working in Seattle.
Very good. Well, you've already asked. Have you lived anywhere else so you lived in Pittsburgh and then Seattle in the States?
Yeah. So first 21 years of my life, I guess, in Singapore, and then 4 years in Pittsburgh, and then I guess 5 years in Pittsburgh, because when I graduated, it was COVID. So my first year of working, I was actually working remotely from Pittsburgh.
Oh my gosh!
And then
I don't miss those days.
And then I moved. Definitely not. Us card gamers, especially physical card gamers, not a good time.
Very true. Fab community, Seattle. I know a little bit about the Pacific Northwest Fab wise, but I want to give this chance to shout out as well about what's the Fab community like up there in Seattle and in Washington, and also I guess in the Pacific Northwest in general.
Oh, it's awesome. It's massive over here. So especially when I started, it was super useful to have as big a Fab community as I did when I started over here. We have armories almost every day. I think the only day we don't have an armory, within say a 45-minute driving distance of me, is on Sunday. I think Sunday might be the only day we don't have an armory. We have armory pretty much. Well, at least 5 of the days.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We have armory.
That's good.
Yeah, which is awesome. And then, it also means we get big pro quests and stuff. I think I mentioned last time. I don't know. I've never had a pro quest that's smaller than 5 Swiss rounds. It's always 5 Swiss rounds. And the last one I was at was actually 6 Swiss rounds. So lots of players to play with. And even the battle harden that we had this year, right, it was massive. It was 145% battle harden, 144 or something. So yeah, it's pretty great to have this massive pool of players and a bunch of events to go to.
Mm-hmm. You spoke a little bit about, I guess, your lead up to getting into Flesh and Blood and TCGs in general. You talked about Altered, for instance. You talked a little bit about Dota, which is always interesting to me. I was a Dota 2 player as well. What are some of your favorite non-fab hobbies and things that you like to do outside of Flesh and Blood?
Wait, what's a non-fab hobby?
Good point, actually.
No, I don't do math. Nah. All right, so video games. Not Dota anymore. I'm kind of glad I left that life behind. I used to be so toxic in that game, by the way. Like that guy who's flaming his entire team, that was me.
Yes. I've encountered you before then.
Yeah, so other video games. So more on the single player side these days, to be honest. I feel like I get the competitive aspect of it from Flesh and Blood. And now it's like my video games are more like the pastime hobby side of things. So currently, actually, World of Warcraft is something I'm pretty into. But like whenever a big title comes out, I'm probably playing it. Like the last one was like Baldur's Gate 3, like last year. I was like super into that. Yeah, I think I did a full run through like 3 times or something.
Oh my goodness.
I also like replaying games because I like to go like pretty deep into it. So it's like I did one run through as like a warlock, and it's like I want to do a different run through. I make different decisions, and I play a different build, and I really like that. So before that was like Elden Ring as well. Like these big games, I'll typically like get it and try and find a play it in my free time.
Middle of it. Yeah. I've similar actually. I think as the more I play competitive card games, the less I've played, I guess, online MOBAs, etc., and just focused on when I do get the chance to play some video games, to play some single player experiences and enjoy the stories in particular, or just kind of sitting in solace and enjoying my own time, which is important, right? To have such a social hobby, Flesh and Blood.
And just problem solving, like just on your own kind of thing is very, very nice. I'm really looking forward to Hades too.
Me too. Favorite movie?
Pretty basic with this one. I think I'll just have to go with The Dark Knight.
Fair enough. Good movie.
Just I don't. Movie watching isn't like I'm the sort of person where I don't really like my favorite pastime. Like when I have free time, what I want to do is play something. Like I don't have a Netflix subscription, for example. Like I very rarely get the urge to sit down and watch something. Maybe it's like every now and then with the right company, I'll be like, okay, cool, I don't mind like watching a movie or something. But like normally I'm just like, if I'm on my own, I want to play something. So I don't think I don't even have a very long list of movies that I have watched. It's typically like franchises that I'm into. Like I was very into the MCU. But now at this point, it's kind of like they have so much content now. But I still go and watch pretty much every MCU movie. But yeah, and like the Batman, the superhero stuff, the standard nerdy stuff. I do watch those. So yeah, I just have to go with The Dark Knight on that one.
Fair enough. More Flesh and Blood. What is your favorite card ever in Flesh and Blood?
My answer for this was definitely like if you asked me like a year or two ago, it's like slam dunk 100% this card. And I think I'm still just gonna have to stick with it just because I don't think there's anything else that captures the same essence. No, it's Gaze the Ages.
Oh, yeah,
I love the card.
Yeah, that's an amazing card.
It's flavorful. It does it rewards you for doing the thing you want to do, but it's not like a super high ceiling reward. It's just but it's just so satisfying to get off. It's absolutely amazing, and I wish it was playable in more than just Kano. Like, I wish like Icelander could have played it, for example. Yeah, it just encapsulates so much of what I kind of want from like a wizard, like what I kind of expect. There's like a setup element to it. There's the instant speed aspect of it. It's blue. It blocks 3. It costs 0. It's just and the art is spectacular as well. I love that card.
It's good. Okay. Favorite hero? I have a couple of guesses of which I think it is, but I'll let you tell us what your favorite hero is.
A couple of guesses. I'm offended. It should be one. It's a slam dunk. There's one obvious favorite hero. I'm lost. How do you have more than one guess on this?
Why? I would assume it's Icelander, but it could be new.
It's Icelander.
You know?
It's definitely Icelander. I will say new is surprisingly sort of. She's getting close. She's definitely not at the Icelander level of how much I love this hero. But the more I dive deep into it, the more I'm like learning about her. And she's getting. She's getting
up
close.
there.
I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, for now it's like for sure Icelander slam dunk. She's the favorite hero.
Favorite format?
Wait, is this like a favorite format as in like favorite meta, like time period in history, or favorite format as in like classic constructed?
You can take it whichever way you like. How about that?
Okay, classic constructed, easily.
All right. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then on that, what about? Do you have a favorite draft set? How much do you enjoy limited then? And do you have a favorite draft set?
We came to this question, didn't we? I feel like you're gonna hate me, man. I'm sorry.
No, someone's got to hate limited on the spot. It was Brendan. Now it's you. It's
out of the job description. Yeah. So okay, I think hate limited is a very, very strong thing. It's not what I want from card games. It's like I think a lot of people try to get into and try and justify and be like, oh no, it's like higher variance or it's lower skill or whatever. I don't think any of that. I think it is very, very skill intensive, and I think if you get really good at it, you can mitigate the variance just like you do in CC.
Yeah,
it's just not. It doesn't activate the same neurons that I want to be activated when I play a card game. For me, a whole point of the enjoyment I get from card games is the deck building aspect of it and the forming game plans for different heroes and forming different strategies and tweaking your deck little by little to make you to have it be better into one strategy, have it be, and in understanding the sort of all the nuances that goes into deck building and forming these different game plans. That's what really excites me about card games, and you just don't quite get that in draft. I think an analogy that I like to use is it's a theater-based analogy. Is drafting is kind of like performing improv, and playing CC is kind of like performing Shakespeare, where it's like.
Fair enough.
You can't say one of them is like more skillful than the other, whatever. They're just two completely different skill sets, and they're enjoyable in different ways. And for me, I'm very, very much into the sort of the controlled aspect, but there's still a lot of skill expression that Classic Constructed provides, and I'm just not too much into draft.
That's a very articulate answer, as opposed to, it's not skill intensive, or it's got more variance. So I'm on board. Yeah, no, that's fair. Hey, look, perfectly fair. What about just favorite set in general? Then, is there a favorite set, or the one that just like you just have nostalgia, or it's just like the set was so good because X, Y, and Z card, or I just love the set flavor wise, whatever.
This is tough. I'm not entirely sure if I have an answer to this. Like, there's Uprising because Icelander existed. Because Icelander came out in Uprising. But so did Dromai, and like that's an illusionist, and I hate illusionists. So it's like, eh. Then Tales of Aria obviously has like a nostalgia element of it, but now the three heroes was something I was like super, super into. MST is new, but again has Enigma, so it's just like it's a wash there. So I don't like like there's a whole bunch of sets I love. Like this, I did really like Uprising for the Iceland aspect of it. It's my favorite hero and everything. Tales of Aria for the nostalgia of it. MST because I do think it's really, really cool, and I think it kind of pushed the design of Fab in ways that are very, very exciting. I just don't think there's anyone that is
not yet
high enough over the others for me to be like, this is my favorite Fab set. So I think I'm gonna leave this as like an unanswered question for now. And when that set comes, we'll I'll let you know.
Fair enough. I'm sure it'll come.
Yeah.
An all assassin or all wizard, the all wizard set that's coming out. Well, we just got a set with 2 wizards, and it's not quite it though, is it? Yeah, we'll move on. Favorite Flesh and Blood accomplishment of your own.
Okay, so I think I'll have like there's some casting. I think like the first time getting the email to like come cast nationals was really, really nice. I felt an accomplishment. I was like, I was doing all these casting things, like half of them on like my own expense, and then getting that, like it felt really, really good. But I think I'm gonna have to go with winning the PTI event last year, the Portland PTI event, which was attached to the Blitz Battle Hardened. There was a Team Blitz Battle Hardened which I was casting actually, and the next day there was a PTI event, and winning that. I think it has to be that one because, well, everything I just said about like what I enjoy about casting instructor, about deck building and forming different strategies, that was, we were in Lexi meta. Everyone was like, oh man, Lexi's insane. And a lot of Icelanders were like, we can't play Iceland until Lexi. But I really liked the game plan that I had formed on Icelander side against Lexi. It was the Encase Weather Vane using point game plan, where you side all your attacks and have multiple Codex of Frailty, and you're just like increasing the odds that you actually get to like back-to-back brick their turns. Like, because now instead of just 3 CLFs, you have 3 CLFs and 3 Weather Vanes and Encases and stuff, which is way better than Warmongers, right? Because it can't snaps out of an Encase.
Can't do it.
Stuff like that. So I was quite proud of like that plan that I formed for Lexi, while also having like the Wounded Bulls and everything on the side for like the Briars or like whoever else I want to face, like the non-Lexis. So I really like that sort of switchboard that I had going on, and then the fact that it found success was quite it was definitely quite rewarding. And also kind of like small humble brag here, the top 8 that I had to go through was, it was Michael Fung into Brody Spurlock into Lucas Oswald. So being able to get through that that row of people definitely also felt very good.
Nice. I actually didn't know much about that event, so that's cool to hear as well. All right, Pankaj, we've come to the last question. Let's look to the future a little bit. You joined around Tales of Aria time. You've been a caster recently, content creation. You're on the podcast. What do you hope to be doing in the next 5 years, Flesh and Blood wise, when it comes to Flesh and Blood?
Well, continuing to be a host of Arsenal Pass, hopefully 5 more years. Let's go.
That's a good start.
Yeah. And honestly, I really love casting. It is just so. I've mentioned many times before, I can talk about this game forever, and just as the game keeps evolving, there's so many more new things to talk about, so many more strategies to dive into, to discover what other people are doing, and then like relay that to like the viewers and everything. I really enjoy that. So hopefully still casting by then as well. And also, I feel like all this is a whole bunch of continuations, which kind of is. But I guess something that I hope to have under my belt 5 years from now is maybe a tier 3 win. So like, currently I have like a Battle Harmony win, a PTI win. It would be nice if I can get a calling win down there as well. Because something like one of the goals I had, especially when I started casting, was to try and be one of those casters that's also a pro player. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to like have a foot in both spheres, because I kind of think, at least I think I become a better caster. At least I get to do my role in the booth the better of a player I am as well. That's the kind of role that I was trying to fill as a caster. So kind of just want to make sure that I am continuing that, and maybe getting a calling win at some point in the next 5 years would be something that I would really, really like.
Love it. Yeah. Well, do you remember now what you said, Pankaj? Great interview. I want to thank you for shedding more light on yourself and giving some time and opening up to our Arsenal Pass community to let all of us know more about yourself. So big thank you to you, Pankaj.
Thank you for preparing the questions and conducting a great interview. Hopefully one day I'll get to return the favor and ask you a bunch of questions.
We'll see. Well, with that said, I do want to shout out to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. Thank you very much. Shout out to everyone for your great questions that are going to be coming in for the pod next week. We do appreciate it. If you are not already subscribed to our channel, why are you not? And until next week, we'll see you on the next pod.